I just have a couple of quick questions that really come to some of the foundational information about this program. We see the numbers from 2015 to 2019. When did the city start this grant program?
It was in 2015.
Okay, so this is a relatively new program then, and was brought in by the prior council. So we are looking at more than double the amount previously done in this program. We're going from 10.8 million to 25 million, correct? Okay, thank you. I'm interested in the targets as they're described. There's 12,000 units you're contemplating 12,000 units over 10 years. When the number of units was calculated, was that based on 1-for-1 or the standard 2.2 people per household? I'm asking this question because when we look at population projections from the long-form census, for example, households are determined by household size, which the average is 2.2.
Yes, Dan Garrison, Assistant Director, Housing Policy in the Planning Department. So when we developed the targets, it's important to remember, I think, that the social housing targets are a subset of a larger number, the 72,000 units that have been targeted in total in terms of supply. The social housing number specifically was a very focused needs-based assessment that took into account both the number of units that we thought would be required by growth, the amount of growth that was going to happen in the city, as well as a needs-based assessment of existing need and underserved households in the city. So households, for example, that are currently in undersized units, spending more than 50% of their income on housing, those are the kinds of measures that we use to determine the need for new non-market housing units. So this was more of an income-based needs approach, which blended both growth and pre-existing need in the community.
Well, as you know, I've questioned before the veracity of the number of 72,000 since, as we've established before, the 2017 to 2027 period, that decade that Housing Vancouver covers, the population projections, reasonably based on historicals, would reach maybe 72,000. Yes. So my concern is that we need to do more work in understanding what our quote-unquote targets are, and this is across the board with Housing Vancouver. But my question very specifically here was with reference to the target of 12,000 units. And at the same time, I would say that we're asking questions about what are realistic population growth and realistic targets. Have we considered the economic and demographic breakdown? I'm assuming that you have in coming up with these numbers, but could you describe in more detail how you've come to these numbers, both in terms of size and category?
So we when we come up with the numbers, particularly around the social housing, we have two measures. We have one approach that we've taken where we have an approach to looking at the proportion of new households in the city that are likely to fall into the income categories and sizes that would require an approach that is not a market-based approach, a non-market approach. So that's one part of the need and the target. The other part is, again, to look at existing households, and there's several components of that. We look both at the income of those households relative to the cost of housing in the market, try to develop a non-market approach to serving households that can't be met, needs can't be met in the market. We look at size, for example, overcrowding. We have a very significant number of households in the city where families with children are living in studio and one-bedroom apartments, and particularly some of that is by choice, some of that is layered with those households having serious income challenges as well. So those are the kinds of factors that we take into account when we're developing a target around non-market housing need.
You must consider, as we're looking at population projections over the next decade, that most of what we hear from the economic development standpoint is that we're attracting new populations here that are coming because of jobs. They're coming here because of the technology sector is one
10
that we hear
seconds left.
touted. So I'm concerned again, and this is a question and also a request back, that we do a more detailed analysis of this, because I do see some disconnect between reasonable expectations in population growth and composition and
thanks.
housing.